The shoulder was warm. I was 25, a music journalist who had been awake for 36 straight hours, and the shoulder belonged to the woman whose recordings I had bought with my dead father's money when I was 14 years old. Her name was Margaux. She was 38, she lived in Vienna, and she had played one of the most disciplined recitals in the usher hall I had ever sat through. Afterwards, I sat with her in the green room of the concert hall on a teal velvet couch that smelled faintly of cedar and rosin, and I told myself I would close my eyes for 1 minute. I closed them. I do not know how long it was. What I do know is that I woke up slowly, not all the way, to the brush of her fingers lifting my hair back from my face, and to the long, careful movement of her right hand at my shoulder, pulling me gently in against her, and to her voice, low and even at the side of my ear, saying 2 words, "Not yet."
Welcome, everyone! Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
I spent the next 3 weeks living inside those 2 words. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I want to back up first. My father was a music critic. He wrote for a newspaper that does not exist anymore, in a city that has changed 3 times since he died. And he taught me one thing more clearly than he taught me anything else, which was that you listen to a musician for years before you ever pretend to know them. He died when I was 13. He left me his collection of recordings, a quiet stack of money in a savings account marked for my education, and a small silver locket on a thin chain at my throat that held one photograph of him at the age I have always remembered him, 38, smiling slightly, holding a fountain pen. I have worn the locket every day since the funeral. I touch it without thinking. I'm about to tell you about the morning the woman in this story opened it, but I have to back up first because the opening of it is not the part that mattered. I was 14 the first time I heard Margaux play. The recording was her debut, a live performance of the Schubert sonatas, recorded at a small festival nobody had bothered to send a real critic to, except my father. He bought the album the week it came out, and he wrote a review of it that I would not read until I was 23, when I found a folded copy of it in a box of his papers, and understood that the woman I had been listening to for 9 years was the same woman my father had recognized, in a 1-page review nobody read, as the most disciplined young pianist he had heard in a decade. The review was the last piece of writing he ever finished. He died of a quiet heart attack at his desk 11 days after he turned it in. I have not been able to listen to those Schubert sonatas all the way through since. I went to university because my mother was sure I should, and I studied musicology because it was the closest thing to what my father had done. And I came out the other side of it knowing very precisely what kind of writing I did not want to do. The writing that drains a piece of music of its weather and leaves only its skeleton on the page. I wanted to write the way my father had written, which is to say, I wanted to be a person who could sit in the 3rd row of a small recital and hear something nobody else had bothered to hear, and then put it on the page in a way that made you want to go back and listen to the recording again on a different evening, paying attention to the things she had told you about. I am 25 years old, and I have written 1 piece of writing in my entire short career that comes close to that. And I am not going to tell you which one, because I have a small superstition that if I say which one out loud, I will never write another. I will say only that I wrote it after a recital nobody important attended, in a small church in Glasgow when I was 23, and that the pianist who gave the recital sent me a single line of email afterward that said, "You heard it." I had the email printed on a small piece of cardstock that I kept in the inside pocket of my coat for 2 years. I have it still. I bought every recording she released after the first one. I bought them on the day they came out, even when I could not really afford to buy them on the day they came out. Even when I had to walk the long way home from work, because I had spent the bus fare. I owned all 4 Schubert sonatas, the Brahms Intermezzi, the live recording from the Salzburg Festival the year she was 29, the small, unreleased private pressing of the Bach Inventions that she did at a friend's funeral the year she turned 34, which had been distributed only to the people in the room, and which I had bought from a collector in Stockholm for more money than I had at the time, because the collector did not know what he was selling, and I did. I had every interview she had ever given on file. I had a folder of every photograph of her hands in performance I could find, not because I was the kind of person who collects pictures of pianists, but because she has a particular way of holding her hands above the keys, in the second before she plays, that I had never seen another pianist do, and I had been collecting examples of it for 9 years, without ever once admitting to myself that I was collecting them. I want to tell you the careful version of how I came to write a long-form profile of Margaux for a music magazine in October of my 25th year, but the careful version is the wrong version, and I am going to be honest about that here. The honest version is that I had been waiting for the assignment since I was 18. I had said yes to 2 underpaid years at the magazine and a 3rd year on the night desk, because I had a polite premonition that if I stayed in the room long enough, my editor Theo would eventually walk in and say the words, "Margaux is coming for an Edinburgh recital. She has agreed to 3 days of interviews afterward, and I want you to write the profile." She walked in and said those words in early September. I had the entire month of September to be sick about it. Theo is the other person you need to know early, because she put me in the chair I would not have put myself in, the way certain friends do. She is 2 years older than me, 6 inches taller, and she has the particular quality of someone who has decided, on your behalf, that you will not be the smallest version of yourself if she has anything to say about it. She is the reason I had this assignment instead of the assistant assignment. She is also the reason that, on the evening of the recital, I had not eaten properly in 2 days, and had not slept properly in 3, because I had spent that entire time rereading every score, every interview, every review I could find of Margaux's 20-year career, and writing exactly 1 sentence of my own about her, which I had not yet found the nerve to keep. The recital was on the 3rd Tuesday of October. Edinburgh in October has a particular cold that is not yet winter and not yet weather, just a thin sharpness that gets under a coat, and the usher hall in that cold is an honest building. I sat in the 3rd row on the right side, in the seat the magazine had booked me, and I watched Margaux walk out from the wings to the piano, with the particular economy of movement she has always had. She did not bow more than once. She did not look at the audience. She crossed to the bench, sat, laid her right hand flat against her own heart for 1 breath, the way I had seen her do in every video of every performance I had ever watched. And then she played. I want to say one true thing about the playing, and then I want to move on, because this is not the story of the recital. The true thing is that she played the Schubert that night. She did not announce a change in the program. She had been booked to play Brahms. She walked out and played the Schubert sonatas my father had reviewed, and I sat in the 3rd row, and I cried in the dark in a way I had not cried in 11 years, and I did not move my hand from my locket the entire first movement. I have asked myself since whether I think she chose the Schubert for me. I have decided that I do not need to know. After the recital, I went backstage, the way the magazine had arranged, with the official credential clipped to my coat. The green room is the long, warm room at the back of the usher hall, where artists and a small circle of staff drift in and out after a performance, drinking coffee from paper cups and not yet speaking quite at full voice. I want to describe the room properly because it matters later. It had a teal velvet couch along the wall under a tall mirror, 2 wooden side chairs, a low table with a kettle and a press of coffee and a bowl of small biscuits. And it smelled, I am being precise, of cedar from someone's coat draped over the back of the wooden chair, and of warm rosin from the hall, and of the faintest trace of black wine, which I would learn the next day was the only thing Margaux drank after a performance, in 1 careful glass. I was introduced to her by Hannah. Hannah is the woman who has been Margaux's program coordinator and traveling companion and quiet conscience for 25 years. She is in her late 50s. She wears small pearl earrings and a particular dark vetiver perfume and a wool shawl in any room cooler than the body. I did not ask Hannah how she knew I had been at the Schubert all the way through. Hannah sees everything. That is the entire size of Hannah. Margaux shook my hand. asked one careful question about the magazine, and we made the kind of opening conversation two professional adults make when they have agreed to spend 3 days together, and they are testing the temperature of the room. She was exactly as composed in person as she had been at the piano. She wore a black wool coat with a high collar, and the cedar I had noticed in the room was hers. Her hair was pulled back in a low knot. Her right hand was bare. She had the watch on her left wrist, an old steel one, the band soft from years. I will tell you the small thing I noticed in the green room that night because it is the thing I added to my list, the way I always add the small thing. When she set her coffee cup down on the low table, she set it down so the handle pointed away from her, not toward herself, away. I understood in the careful way I understood things that she did this because at some point in the next hour she would offer the cup to someone else, and the someone else should not have to turn it. She was a person who set cups down for the next person already. Hannah drifted out to handle something. The room thinned. Someone closed the door to the corridor. The hall outside had emptied. I sat on the teal couch because it was the closest seat to where I had been standing and because my legs had decided, without consulting me, that they were finished standing. I had my notebook open in my lap. I was writing the way you write when you are too tired to make the writing useful. Long, shapeless sentences that you will not be able to read in the morning. Margaux sat at the other end of the couch with a copy of the score she had played that night and a silver fountain pen, marking small, careful notes in the margins of the third movement. We did not speak. I closed my eyes for 1 minute. That is the entire size of the decision I made that night. I closed my eyes for 1 minute. The next thing I felt was a hand at my hair. It was very gentle. Her fingers lifted my hair back from where it had fallen across my face, and the cool of the room moved against my cheek for the first time in what I realized later had been a long, quiet hour. I did not move. I did not open my eyes. Some part of me that had been 13 years old at a funeral knew, before the rest of me caught up, exactly what was happening and exactly what I was going to do about it, which was nothing. Her hand went from my hair to my shoulder, slowly. She slid her arm behind me along the back of the couch in a long, careful motion. And then the line of her hand at my shoulder gathered me, and she pulled me gently, without hurry, the way you move something you do not want to wake, in against the side of her. Her shoulder was warm. Her coat was warm. The cedar was right against my face. Her voice was at my ear, low and even, and she said, "Not yet." I had been pretending to be asleep for 40 seconds by the time she said it. I did not stop pretending. I lay against her shoulder for what I will not estimate in minutes, because I have not allowed myself to estimate, and at some point I let the pretending become real. When I woke up properly, the room was darker. She had a hand at my shoulder still, her other hand still holding the score. She was reading by the small lamp on the side table. She had not moved. I lay there with my face against the wool of her coat for what I could not later count in minutes. I want to be exact about why I did not move. There were 2 reasons, and I have looked at them honestly since. And I will tell you both. The first reason is that I was tired in a way I had not been tired in 11 years, and I had not been held against the side of another person, by another person since my father had died, and the warmth of the contact had reached a place in me I had stopped noticing was cold. The second reason is that I had spent 9 years writing in my notebook about a woman who held herself at the keyboard with such complete economy that it was a kind of severity. And the woman holding me at her shoulder now was the same woman. And the severity was on the outside and the warmth was on the inside. And if I moved, I was afraid I would lose the proof I had just been given of which was which. So I lay still. I let her keep her hand at my shoulder. I let the cedar of her coat be the only thing in my private weather for the duration of 1 careful chapter of a score I could not see. And I made a decision in that quiet, although I did not know yet what the decision was, only that the next morning at 11, I would not be the kind of journalist I would have been at 10 yesterday. I sat up. I was very careful about how I sat up, because I had spent 11 years cultivating a face for moments I did not have the right answer to. I used the face now. She did not turn. She said, in the same low, even voice she had used at my ear, only louder by a fraction, "Your interview is at 11 tomorrow." I said, "Okay." I picked up my coat, my tortoiseshell hair clip, my grandmother's, the one with the missing prong, was not in my hair where I had pinned it. I did not look for it. I left it. I went out of the green room into the long, cold corridor of the Usher Hall, and out into Edinburgh in October, and I did not stop walking until I reached the hotel. I want to tell you what I did with the rest of that night, because what I did with the rest of that night is the thing I am most quietly proud of in this whole story. And it did not look like anything at all. I sat at the desk in my small hotel room with my notebook open in front of me, and I did not write a word about her. I made tea. I made the tea badly, because the kettle was an old one, and I did not have the patience to do it correctly. I drank the tea. I went to the window and looked at the rain on the glass for a long time. I did not cry. I did not draft a confession to send. I did not write the sentence about her I had been failing to write for a month. I sat with what had happened, by which I mean I sat with the full size of it, that she had brushed my hair back, that she had pulled me in against her shoulder, that she had said the most dangerous 2 words in any language to a person she had known for an hour, and that she had said them low and certain, the way a person says something she has already decided on. I made one decision that night. I decided I would not let her be the only one who had done a brave thing. I had spent the autumn making myself smaller around this assignment, and I was going to walk into her hotel suite at 11 tomorrow morning, and I was going to do the interview as honestly as I knew how. And at the end of it, I was going to ask her plainly what I had a right to know. I slept 4 hours. I dreamed of the cedar. I woke up at 6:15 and put my hair up with a different clip, because the tortoiseshell one was still on the green room couch where I had pretended to be asleep on her shoulder. There was an envelope at the desk of the hotel when I came down for coffee at 9. It was a plain ivory envelope with my name written across it in a small, even hand, a hand I had only ever seen in the marginal notes she made in scores. I opened it standing at the desk because I did not trust myself to wait. Inside was my tortoiseshell hair clip, the missing prong still missing, and a note that said, "You left this? M." That was the whole note. M for Margaux. No apology, no reference to anything. The only meaningful thing in those 3 words was that she had not pretended she did not know whose it was. I clipped it back into my hair on the elevator, going up to her suite at 11. She opened the door herself. She was in a soft gray sweater over the same charcoal trousers from the night before. Her hair was down. She did not have shoes on. She made coffee, black, no sugar, in 2 cups, and she set mine down on the side of the small table with the handle pointing toward me. She poured a small splash of milk into mine from a tiny jug, without asking, because she had watched me drink coffee with milk in the green room the night before, and she had remembered. I noticed that. I added it to the list I had already been keeping about her without ever calling it a list. The list had 11 things on it by the end of that morning. We did the interview. I sat in the armchair across from her with my notebook open, and I asked the questions I had prepared, and she answered them the way she did everything, evenly, with no waste, with the small surprising precision she brought to her playing. We talked for 90 minutes about the Schubert, and about her conservatory teacher, and about the year she had stopped touring and what had brought her back. She did not refer once to the green room. Neither did I. I made notes. I drank the coffee. The locket sat warm against the place I always touched it without thinking. At 10 minutes to 1, I closed my notebook on my lap, set the pen across the cover, and looked at her properly for the first time. I said, "I want to say something first, before we finish." She set her cup down. She turned the handle of it toward me, the way she had turned the cup the night before in the green room, and she folded her hands in her lap. She was very good at being still. She said, "Ask it." I said, "If you would prefer a different journalist to finish this profile, I will arrange it. The magazine will not mind. I do not want to be a problem you did not sign up for. I am asking plainly because I do not know how to ask any other way, and because I think you and I have already agreed, without agreeing, that we are not going to be people who guess." She looked at me for a long moment. I will tell you that her eyes are a particular dark gray that is not actually gray. The way certain colors are not what they look like at first. I will not finish that sentence properly. Her eyes are dark gray. They are very steady. She kept them on me. She said, "No, I do not want a different journalist." I said, "Then I am going to ask you one more plain question, and then we will go on with whatever the rest of this is. What was last night?" She did not look away. She said, "Last night you had been awake for 36 hours, and you had cried at the Schubert, and you sat down on the couch in the green room, and within an hour, you were asleep against my shoulder. You did not put yourself there. You fell. I should have woken you, and I chose not to. That is the entire size of what happened. I am not going to pretend it was less, and I am not going to make it more." I said, "Okay." She said, "Okay." There was a particular long quiet between us then that I am going to refuse to describe, because if I describe it, I will be lying about it, and the only true thing I can tell you about it is that we both knew, by the end of it, that neither of us was going to pretend the next 3 weeks of this profile were going to be the profile we had planned. She poured me more coffee. She put the handle of the cup toward me again. She said the only sentence she said that morning that was not a polite professional sentence. She said, "My name is Margaux." I said, "I know." She said, "I know you know. I am asking you to use it." I said, "Okay, Margaux." The room was very quiet. Outside, the rain had started, and Edinburgh was taking it the way Edinburgh takes everything, with the kind of patience that has weather. That was the morning we drew the line. We did not call it a line. We sat in that hotel suite with our coffee cups handled toward each other, and we agreed, without agreeing, that we were going to spend the next 3 weeks at a distance that we had both deliberately measured, and that the measuring of the distance was going to be the thing. I have learned since that the line is only worth drawing between two people who both already know that they would otherwise. We drew ours over a cup of bad hotel coffee in a suite in Edinburgh in the second week of October, and we did not look away from it for 3 weeks. The first week of that arrangement passed in a strange suspended quiet that I want to walk you through carefully, because the weeks are the real story, and the moment on the shoulder was only the door we walked through to get to them. Here is how the days arranged themselves. Margaux had a residency obligation, 3 more public concerts, and 4 recording sessions for the new album she was finishing for her label, and the magazine had cleared me to follow her through all of it. I had a small folding chair I sat in at the back of the recording studio with my notebook. I had a row of seats at her remaining concerts. I had a quiet table at the back of the green room afterwards. Margaux did her work. I did mine. We did not sit close. We did not touch. We did not, in front of any of the orchestra people or any of the recording engineers or any of the venue staff, do a single thing that was different from the polite arrangement we had agreed to in her suite that morning. But she set a coffee for me on the small side table of the recording booth every morning of every recording session, without asking, with the handle toward me. The coffee was always exactly the way I drank it. I never said thank you out loud. I drank it, I added it to the list, and on the third evening, after a concert, she came back through the green room and crossed the room and laid her right hand flat against her own heart for one breath the way she did before she went on. And she sat down at the wooden chair across from the couch I was on, not next to me, and we did not speak. And she opened her score and made notes for an hour, while I made notes for an hour, and the lamp on the side table threw the same warm circle of light it had thrown the night the shoulder had been warm. I want to be precise about how small these things were. They were small. They were so small that anyone who walked into that green room would have seen 2 professional women in 2 separate chairs, with their separate notebooks, doing their separate work in companionable silence. There was nothing for anyone to see. But the country that had its own laws was on the small table between us with 2 cups of coffee, handles turned toward each other, and we both knew it. And we both kept our chairs. Hannah came on the Sunday afternoon between the second and third concert with a paper bag of almond biscuits. Hannah is the person who said the thing out loud, so I have to bring her in. She sat down in the wooden chair beside the couch. She watched me carry the coffee tray in from the small kitchen of the recording studio. She watched Margaux pull the second lamp 2 inches to the left so the tray would not have to share its place with the score. She ate a biscuit. She looked at me, then at Margaux, then at me again, and she said, in a voice that was not at all lowered, 25 years I've come on Sundays. 25 years I have sat in that wooden chair and watched her sit on that side of the room alone. You are sitting where there has never been a person sitting before. I am old. I am not blind. I am too old to pretend the room looks the way it looked last month. Margaux said, Honey. Hane said, I am only saying what is in front of me. I brought biscuits. I do not bring biscuits for one person. I have not brought biscuits for one person in 25 years. I brought them for 2. Iris, eat one. I ate one. I did not look at Margaux. Margaux did not look at me. Hannah ate 2 more biscuits and then went to the small kitchen to make her own coffee. And she did not say another word the rest of the afternoon, because she did not need to. The Sunday Hannah came with the biscuits was the same week the weather turned. There were 2 days of rain and a cold front. And on the worst night, I came to the recording studio an hour earlier than I needed to because my hotel room had grown unfamiliar to me, in the particular way a hotel room grows unfamiliar to a person who has been quietly losing the careful shape of their life inside it. I let myself in with the key card the engineers had given me. The studio was dark except for the small lamp in the green room. The kettle was already on. The teal couch had a wool blanket folded across the arm that had not been there the night before. Margaux was at the piano in the main room, in the dark, playing the slow movement of a sonata I did not recognize, in the half-tempo a pianist uses when they are not practicing for a performance, but for themselves. She did not see me come in. I stood in the doorway of the booth and listened for the length of one phrase, and then I made myself useful, and went back to the green room and made coffee. And when she came in 20 minutes later, her hands cold from the unheated main room, the coffee was waiting on the side table, with the handle toward her. She picked up the wool blanket. She put it around my shoulders without explaining why she had brought it. She sat down in the wooden chair. She said only, I always come early on storm nights. I did not know you would. I said I did not know you did. She said, we have something in common then. We worked in silence for an hour, the kettle ticking as it cooled, the rain at the high studio window slowing as Edinburgh took it. And at some point my hand had come to rest on the arm of the couch, and at some point hers had come to rest on the wooden arm of her chair, and the distance between our hands across the small side table was less than the width of a finger. And we both knew it was there. And neither of us moved, and we held that finger's width for the length of an entire chapter of a book I would not have been able to name afterward. I went back to my hotel that night and asked myself a question I did not have an answer for. Why was she being kind to me? Not the coffee. Kindness explains a coffee. I meant the larger thing. I meant the silence on the couch and the second lamp, and the small, careful way she had begun, in tiny, invisible motions, to make a room for me inside a room she had occupied alone for years. People are not usually willing to make a room for a thing they have only just noticed they want, which meant she had wanted it for longer than just noticing, which meant I had been sitting in the 3rd row of her recitals for 9 years, being looked at, possibly by someone I had never once let myself imagine could look back. I lay there with the locket open in my hand, turning it, my father's small, smiling face. The same age she is now, 38. I had not been ready to think that thought. I thought it. In the middle of the 2nd week, she taught me something at the piano. And that evening is the one I take out and look at most often, because it is the evening I understood what the rest of October was going to cost me. We were alone in the recording studio at the end of a long day. The engineers had gone. Hannah had gone. There was a passage in the 3rd Schubert sonata that she had not been satisfied with in the take, a single phrase of 8 measures that she wanted to do one more time without anyone watching. She sat down at the instrument the way she always sat down, right hand to her own heart, one breath, then the hands at the keys. I was at the back of the studio with my notebook. She played the phrase, Then she played it again. Then she sat for a moment, her hands resting on her knees, and she said, without turning, "Iris." I closed my notebook. She said, "Come here." I went and stood at her left shoulder by the piano. She did not turn to look at me. She said, "Listen to the silence between these two notes. The silence is the entire size of the phrase. The notes are how I hold the silence still long enough for you to hear it." She played the two notes, one, and then after a beat I could feel in my own ribs, the other. She said, "That, the one in the middle, that is what the whole sonata is for." She played it 3 more times. The third time, I said very quietly beside her, "I know." She did not look at me, but her right hand, the one nearest to me, lifted from the keys for 1 second, came back, and rested for 1 more second longer than it needed to before she played the next phrase. That is the entire size of what passed between us at the piano that evening. Her hand resting for 1 second longer than it needed to. I added it to the list. It was the 7th thing on the list. I had stopped trying not to add things to the list. When the phrase was finally the way she wanted it, she stepped back from the piano. She always stepped back. That was the entire architecture of those 3 weeks. She would come exactly as close as the work required, not 1 degree closer, and then she would step back, cleanly. And the stepping back was not coldness. I want to be very clear that it was never coldness. It was respect for the line we had drawn in the suite that morning. She had agreed to the line the same as I had, and she held it the way she held everything, with the surgical patient discipline she brought to her instrument. And the holding of it was, I came to understand, the most romantic thing anyone had ever done in my presence. Anyone can cross a line. It takes a particular and serious person to stand at one, every night, close enough to feel the warmth coming off the other side, and choose it. That night I wrote nothing in my notebook. I lay in my hotel and I let myself, for once, not catalog. I let the evening stay one large, unmeasured thing. And just before I slept, I heard the small, clean sound of an envelope being slid under my hotel door. I went to the door and picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of staff paper from her score case. She had drawn, in her even, careful hand, the 2 notes she had played me. There were no words. There was, in the bottom corner, the same small M she had signed the hairclip note with. I slept with the sheet on the pillow beside me. There was something she did not yet know, which was that I had heard her stop outside my door before she put the envelope under it. And there was something I did not yet know, which was how much longer either of us could do this. By the end of the 2nd week, the recording sessions had settled into a rhythm, and the rhythm had a name even though we never said it. Theo saw it before I admitted it. She came up from London for the Friday concert, and we had a drink in a quiet bar near my hotel afterwards. She watched me unwrap my coat without looking up from the table. She watched me set my notebook down to the right side of my plate, where I had developed the habit of setting it because Margaux always set her score on the right of her cup. Theo watched me do this. She said, "Iris." I said, "Yes." She said, "You are in love with her." I said, "I am going to be honest with you because you are my friend. I do not know what I am." She said, "You do know. You catalog everything. You know to the millimeter. You are choosing not to file it." And that was true. And it was the kindest, cruel thing she said to me that year, because she was right that I knew. And she was right that I had built a small, careful room inside myself, and put the knowledge in it, and shut the door. And the reason I had shut the door was that the residency was 3 weeks away in Vienna, and Margaux's life was already on a train I did not have a ticket for. I said that to Theo. I said, "She is being offered a 3-year residency at the Vienna State Opera. She has 6 weeks to answer. Her tour ends here in 10 days. After that, she goes home. I am the journalist writing her profile. I am not a person she can take with her. I am a paragraph in an interview." Theo did not have an answer for that. She was not the kind of friend who had answers. But she reached across the table and held my wrist for a moment. the way you hold the wrist of someone who is about to do a difficult thing. And she said, "You should find out what it is, on purpose, in words, before her tour decides for you." She let go. I had wine. Theo had wine. We did not talk about it again, and that was, in its way, exactly the right amount. I have to tell you about the locket now, because the locket is the part of the story where everything we had been carefully not saying for 2.5 weeks came into one small room and sat down between us. It was the Thursday of the 3rd week. There had been a long recording day. There was a particular evening light in the green room that the engineers had left for me when they cleared out. They had begun in the 2nd week to leave the green room set up for me, with the kettle full and the lamp on and the side table cleared, because it had become the thing I did, sit there with my notebook after a session, and Margaux had begun in the same week to come find me there. The green room belonged to us by then. The teal couch had been moved 1 inch closer to the wooden chair. Hannah had noticed. Hannah had said nothing. I had taken the locket off that morning. I had not meant to. The chain had been loose for years. My mother had been going to take it to be tightened. And then my mother had died. And the loose chain had become one more thing I would not be able to ask anyone to repair, without grief tipping out of my hands. That morning, brushing my hair up, I had felt the chain give, and had set the locket down on the bedside table with one careful hand, and had decided I would deal with it after the day's session. I had spent the entire day with the place at my throat where the locket should have been feeling, I am embarrassed to admit it, like a door that had been left open in a house I lived alone in. I came into the green room at 6. Margaux was already there. She was sitting in the wooden chair. The lamp on the side table was on. The kettle had been boiled. There was a small piece of folded paper at the place where my coffee cup usually went. On top of the paper was my locket. The chain had been mended. The new piece of chain was a different shade of silver from the old one. But the join was so small, you had to look for it to find it. I stood in the doorway of the green room, and I did not trust my voice, so I did not use it. She did not look up from her score. She said, evenly, with no weight at all, "You did not have it at lunch. I asked at the desk of your hotel whether you had left it. They said you had not. I had the chain tightened at the jeweler on the corner. There is a piece of paper under it from the jeweler with what you owe them. Do not give me the money." I said, "The only thing I had." "Why?" She set the score down. She looked at me. The light in her dark gray eyes was the particular evening Edinburgh light. She said the longest sentence she said in the entire 3 weeks. In the calm, even voice she said everything in. She said, "People think the word for what I do is kindness. It is not. I am not especially kind. The word is correctness. I cannot stand to watch a thing that is coming apart when I have the tools to hold it together, and I am simply not using them. That is all it has ever been with me when I notice. A score that has been misedited, a student who is being miscast, a chain that has been failing at the throat of a person who keeps her father in a locket against it because he was the first person who ever heard me play, and she has never once let her hand stop touching the place where he is. I'm sorry. That was more than you asked. I crossed the room. I sat down on the teal couch with the locket in my hand. I did not put it on. I held it. The chain was warm in a way it should not have been, because she had been holding it. I said, "You read the review?" She said, "I have carried it folded inside my score case for 11 years. I knew your name the first day Hannah brought me your file. I knew it before that. I have known your last name was the same as the man who wrote the only honest review of my debut since I was 27 years old. I did not say so." I did not think it was mine to say. I thought you would tell me when you were ready, or you would not, and either was correct. The green room was very quiet. The Edinburgh evening was at the high window. I put the locket on. The clasp held. I touched the place at my throat where it sat, the way I always touched it. I said, "Margaux." She said, "Yes." I did not say anything else. There was nothing to say. We sat with the locket and the closed score and the warm lamp and the teal couch and the 11 things on the list and the third week ending in 3 days. And I sat with what she had told me until I could no longer pretend I did not know exactly what I was going to do about it. I had not been expecting that. I had walked into the green room missing a locket, and I was walking back to my hotel that night holding a different shape entirely. And I did not have a list long enough for it, and for once, I did not want one. I went back to my hotel that night, and I did not sleep. I do not mean I lay awake and rolled over. I mean I sat at the small desk in the small hotel room with the locket warm at my throat, and I tried to write the closing of the profile I was supposed to file in 8 days. And I could not write it because the version of the profile I had spent 4 weeks researching was no longer the true profile. And the true profile was a thing I did not yet have the right to write down. I drafted a paragraph, I deleted it. I drafted a second paragraph, I deleted it. I wrote a single sentence about the way she lays her hand against her own heart for one breath before she plays. I left that sentence on the page. It was the only sentence I kept that night. Hannah came to my hotel the next morning. She did not announce herself. She arrived at the breakfast room at 9 with her wool shawl and her vetiver perfume, and the small private smile that Hannah wears when she has come to do a careful thing. She sat down across from me. She ordered tea. She did not look at me until the tea had arrived. Then she said quietly, "She has the letter from Vienna at the suite on the desk. It came in the diplomatic pouch yesterday. It has been there for 24 hours, and she has not opened it. I have known her 25 years. She has never not opened a letter in 24 hours. I am not telling you to do anything. I am telling you that I have known her 25 years, and the woman I have known would have opened the letter. And the woman she is now is not opening it. And that is what is in front of me. I am too old to pretend I do not see what is in front of me. That is all I came to say." She drank her tea. She left. I went up to my room and I sat with what she had told me for the rest of the morning, and I did not have an answer for it. But I had a clearer question, and the clearer question was the only thing I had needed. 3 days later, the letter from the Vienna State Opera arrived properly, in the way large important letters arrive, on the official stationery of the institution, hand-delivered by a courier to her suite at 4 in the afternoon, while I sat across from her with my notebook open for the last interview before her tour ended. She read it once. She set it down on the table between us, official stationery up, and she looked at me and she said, "You should not be in the room for this." I said, "I am going to be honest with you because that is the only way I have ever known how to write a profile, and because I think we are past the point where I can pretend to be in a room as a journalist. I am going to leave. I will come back at 7 if you want me. If you do not want me at 7, I will not come." She said, "Iris." I said, "Yes." She said, "Come back at 7. I came back at 7. She opened the door herself. She was in the same gray sweater from the morning of the first interview. She had not had shoes on then. She did not have shoes on now. There was a strange small symmetry to it that we both noticed, I think, although neither of us said so. The Vienna letter was on the table where she had left it. She had not touched it. She made coffee. The handle of my cup pointed toward me. The small splash of milk was already in it. We sat in the same 2 chairs we had sat in the morning I had asked her plainly what last night had been. She said, "I am going to tell you what is in the letter, and then I am going to ask you a question, and you are not going to answer it the way you think I am asking it. I am going to ask it once. Do not be ready." I said, "Okay." She said, "The Vienna State Opera has offered me a residency for 3 years beginning in February. It is the largest job I have been offered in my career. They have given me 6 weeks to decide. I have been deciding for 9 months. I have not been able to decide. I came to Edinburgh hoping I would decide here, and I have not decided here either. I have been telling myself for 9 months that the reason I cannot decide is that I am tired of touring and I do not know what I want my life to look like in 3 years. But the reason I cannot decide is not that. The reason I cannot decide is that I have stopped being able to imagine the 3 years without a particular person in them. I did not know who the person was 9 months ago. I have known since the first morning of these interviews. I have not said so, and I would not have said so, because we drew a line, and I have lived inside the line as carefully as I know how to live inside anything. She paused. She did not look away. She said, I am asking you the question. Do not answer the way you think I am asking it. Iris, if I tell you tomorrow that I have accepted Vienna, what do you do? I had been ready for almost every question she could have asked me. I had not been ready for that one. I had been ready for the question that asked me to tell her what I felt. I had not been ready for the question that asked me what I would do if she went. I want to slow all the way down for what happened next, because everything I am in this story comes down to what I did with the next 20 seconds. And what I did was refuse the easy version of being good. The easy version was on the table in front of me. The easy version was to say, I want you to take Vienna. Of course you should take Vienna. Do not stay because of a journalist. Write me when you can. I could have given that answer. I could have given that answer in 3 sentences. It would have made me, in any account I ever told of this evening, the noble person in this room. It would have been the most respectable thing I had ever said. But I had spent 3 weeks watching her hold a line on purpose. Every single evening, every single coffee with the handle toward me, every single second longer than it had to be. And I had learned from her that the respectable answer and the loving answer are not always the same answer. And that on the days they are not, you have to choose. And you have to say which one you are choosing, out loud, where the other person can hear you pay for it. I did not take the noble exit. I said, I am not going to answer the question you asked, because the question you asked is the wrong question. The question you asked is, what would I do if you went? That is a question you ask a person who is not going with you. I am going to answer a different question. I am going to tell you what I am. And then you can ask me a question I am willing to answer. I am the journalist writing your profile. I am also the daughter of the only man who ever wrote you an honest review when you were 27 years old. I am also a person who has bought every recording you ever released since I was 14, with money he left me, and who has sat in the 3rd row of every Edinburgh concert you have given since I was 18, and who walked into a green room 4 weeks ago and fell asleep on your shoulder by accident, and woke up to you brushing my hair back and pulling me in and saying 2 words to me that I have spent 3 weeks living inside of. I am telling you the size of what I am, because I will not let you decide Vienna with the wrong information. I am in love with you. I have been since before I had a word for it. I am not asking you to take that into account. I am asking you to take it out of the room before you decide. Because if you decide Vienna without knowing this, you decide Vienna on a lie. And I have spent my whole life around honest reviews. And I am not going to be the person who lets you write a dishonest one about your own life. If you take Vienna, I will turn in this profile and you will go. And I will be glad you went. Because I will know you went on the truth. If you do not take Vienna, I am going to need you to tell me why. Not on a stage, not in a letter. Here, with your shoes off, in a room with 2 cups of coffee turned toward each other. That is the entire size of what I have. I am not going to ask you the question. The question is yours. She did not step back. She crossed the room. She came to stand in front of my chair. I stood up. We were the same height standing. I had not known we were the same height. She set her right hand against the side of my face, her palm along my jaw, her thumb resting just under the place where the chain of my father's locket sat across my throat. And she held my face that way for a long second without saying anything. And her hand was very warm, and I understood with total clarity that she had done this in her head every evening for 3 weeks, and that the doing of it now was not the first time she had done it. She said, "How long do you think I have known?" I said, "I have wondered that for 2 weeks. I think longer than I have known. I think you knew the day Hannah brought you my file." she said before that. She pressed her thumb once against the chain at my throat. I had a season ticket holder write me a letter when I was 28. He told me his daughter had stopped speaking for 6 months after his colleague died at his desk, and that she had started speaking again the week she heard a recording of mine. He sent me a copy of his colleague's review. I have carried it for 11 years. Hannah sent me a list of journalists for the profile in August. Your name was on it. I asked Hannah to put you at the top. I have been asking myself since August what would happen if you walked into my green room. I did not have a plan. Then you fell asleep on my shoulder, and the plan made itself, which was that I would brush your hair back and pull you in and say the only true 2 words I had, and then I would spend 3 weeks finding out whether they were also yours. She paused. She did not move her hand from my jaw. She said, I want you to know 2 things about what I said to you in the green room that first night, so you do not have to wonder afterward. The first thing is that I had been holding the words for a long time. I had not known to whom I would say them. I knew the shape of them. I had carried the shape of them across 9 countries and 4 orchestras and into a number of green rooms before yours. I had been waiting to find a person whose presence in a room I did not have to manage. You walked into the room and I did not have to manage you. You sat down on the couch, and the couch had been a person away from me for years and was suddenly less. You closed your eyes for 1 minute and I am being precise about this. I was relieved. I had been waiting 9 countries to be relieved that a person was in my green room. The second thing is that when I said the 2 words at your ear, I did not say them lightly. I did not say them as a holding pattern. I have not said those 2 words in any language in my adult life. I said them because if I had said any other 2 words, I would have woken you. And I did not want to wake you. And I also did not want you to be a person to whom anything happened by accident. I wanted to be on the record. I said the 2 words on the record so that if you were ever going to ask me what last night had been, I would have already answered. And I would have already meant it. I said her name. I said Margaux. I had been saving it. I understood finally why she spent names so rarely, because a name laid down by itself, with nothing around it to soften it, is the most direct sentence there is. And you only want to use the most direct sentence there is once or twice in a whole October. She kissed me by the window with the rain at the high glass and the lamp warm behind us. It was not a long kiss, and I am not going to make it into a longer one than it was. Her hand stayed at my jaw. Her forehead came to rest against mine afterward, and we stood there, breathing the same small column of cedar and coffee air, and neither of us said anything for a while, because there was, at last, nothing left that needed saying out loud. When she did speak again, it was to ask, quietly, about the practical shape of things, because she was Margaux, and even with her forehead against mine, she could not help being a person who held things together correctly. We talked it through, standing up, by the window, my hand finally allowed to rest on her arm. She could ask the Vienna State Opera to defer for 1 year. Institutions deferred residencies for people who asked properly, and she would ask properly. She would come to my city for that year. She would do the smaller residencies that already had her booked, and she would come to my flat in the evenings when the recording was done, and we would find out whether the country with its own laws that we had built on a teal couch in a green room could stand up to weather. None of it had to be solved that night. What had to be solved that night had been solved the moment I refused to give her the noble exit, and she refused, in turn, to step back. She said, "You understand that I am not going to be easy. 20 years on stages. I have edges." I said I have cataloged every one of them. I am not afraid of an edge. I am a music journalist. I am very good with old, valuable, complicated things. The corner of her mouth did the thing it does when she is about to play a phrase she loves, and it turned out that when Margaux truly smiled, it was worth every evening I had spent across a green room from her, waiting to find out. We did not do anything else dramatic that night. I want to be honest about that because I know the kind of story this could have turned into, and it is not the kind of story it was. She made another pot of coffee. She made it in the same cup with the handle she always turned toward me. We sat on the teal couch. The couch had come back with her from the usher hall on the second night of recording. On her instruction, the engineers had laughed about it. It was the touring couch now, and we sat at the two ends of it, not 8 feet apart in 2 chairs, but at the two ends of the couch itself, which was wide enough for it, exactly wide enough. If 2 people who had spent 3 weeks measuring 6 inches on a recording bench had finally, deliberately decided how to spend them, she read to me, not a score, a small book of letters by a composer she loved. In her low, unhurried voice, the voice she used at the piano for the silences between phrases. I sat with my shoulder against her shoulder and my father's locket holding shut at my throat, because she had decided it was not correct to let it fall. And I did the thing I had not managed to do since I was 13 years old. I stopped cataloging. I kept no list of that evening. I have no entry for it anywhere. I let it be one large, unmeasured hour, the first I had allowed myself since the funeral, and I have never for a moment regretted the gap it left in the record. Outside, the rain on Edinburgh slowed and stopped, the way it always does, and the city took the rest of the night the way the city takes everything, with the patience that has weather. I thought, not sadly, that I had been a little like the rain for 11 years, quiet, careful, knowing where to stop. And I thought that the woman beside me was the first thing in 11 years to have asked me, without once raising her voice, whether I might consider falling all the way through. It is October again now, a full year from the recital, and I am telling you this from the small flat we share in the city I have always lived in. And I want to leave you with how the rooms look, because the rooms are the answer to everything. She did not go to Vienna in February. She wrote the letter properly, the way she does everything, and the Vienna State Opera deferred her for a year, and she will go for 1 year next autumn, and I am going with her. We will rent a small flat near the Concerthaus. We will come back here in the summers. None of that was decided that night in Edinburgh. We have decided it since, in the small even way she decides everything, on Sunday afternoons, over coffee with the handles turned toward each other. The teal couch made it from the usher hall to the recording studio to the back of a van to a small flat in a city that is not Vienna and not yet. It is by the window now. We read in it in the evenings. I write in it in the mornings. She does not play in this flat. There is an upright at the small chamber hall around the corner where she practices. But she sits at the writing desk by the window with her score case and her silver pen, and she marks the small notes in the margins of the third movement of the Schubert that I cried at the night I was 25. Hannah came on the first Sunday with a paper bag of almond biscuits and a quiet smile that did not need anything else. She ate the biscuits in the wooden chair we brought with us. She looked at me, then at Margaux, then at the locket at my throat, then at the silver pen on the desk, and she did not say a single word the whole afternoon, which from Hannah is a whole speech. There are things I have not put in this telling because they belong to the long, quiet shape of a life that 2 careful people have started to build, out of small Sunday afternoons. I will tell you one of them. The night Margaux played her first concert in this city since coming back from the tour, at the small chamber hall around the corner from the flat. She did the thing she has always done before she goes on, the right hand laid flat against her own heart for one breath, and then she walked out, and she played the Schubert again. She did not announce a change in the program. She had been booked to play Brahms. I sat in the 3rd row on the right side, in the seat she had booked me. I cried in the dark in the way I had cried in October, only this time I knew exactly what she was telling me. I did not need a list. I touched the locket. The chain held. I walked her home afterward through the cold streets of the city my father had walked me through when I was 12, holding her arm, the cedar of her coat against my face. My father's locket is on the small blue dish at night now, beside Margaux's watch, and the chain has never once given again. And the teal couch, the long teal couch that started as a piece of green room furniture, the one I fell asleep on by accident, the one she pulled me into the side of and said 2 words. The couch is wide enough, it turns out, if 2 people who spent 3 weeks learning the exact value of 6 inches finally decide to close the distance. We read in it in the evenings, the good lamp, the cedar of her coat over the back of the wooden chair, the coffee with the handles turned toward each other, which is no longer only her habit, Last night, I started to stand up to put the kettle on, and she set her hand lightly at my shoulder, the way she did the very first time. And she said the two words I have been living inside for a year and intend to go on living inside for the rest of my life. She said, "Not yet." I stayed there with her hand at my shoulder, exactly the way I had stayed on the green room couch a year ago, without knowing what I was staying for. And the kettle waited, and the city outside took the cold weather it always takes, and we read in the warm light by the window, and we did not move for a long, unmeasured hour, and that is the entire size of it. 300. Onela Hazaraluncha SRTY at.